Ferrari is ready to push. In Formula One, this necessity is crucial to win, as from all perspectives, being ahead of the competitors is the best way to reach the set goals. To cross the finish line first, in fact, besides having a competitive car and executing a flawless race weekend, it is essential to always be one step ahead of the rivals. The prancing horse has already hit the track with the SF-25. This happened in the first shakedown at Fiorano last week, where, on home soil, the two main drivers were able to test the new car's qualities. This is all considering that we are talking about a test on a track regulated by the International Federation, where the mileage was restricted to a maximum of 200 kilometers and the top speed could not exceed 200 kilometers per hour. Despite this, the 2025 version of the red car gathered as much data as possible in Bahrain's setup. On the other hand, in just one day, all Formula One cars will meet in Sakhir, in the Middle East, for the official pre-season testing session. For this reason, it was important to gather useful information to update the simulator. Ferrari did this with great satisfaction after the work carried out. In these tests, Lewis Hamilton provided several feedbacks on the 066/15 power unit, which was updated thanks to the small room for maneuver offered by the FIA to make the Italian engine more efficient. A decisive move that should make the Modena power unit more effective, both in qualifying and over the 300-kilometer distance. Meanwhile, there is an interesting factor that Ferrari team principal Frederic Vasseur himself confirmed. It concerns the approach to the 2025 World Championship, which is much more than a transitional season awaiting the latest regulatory revolution in Formula One. Ferrari is truly tired of watching others win. Almost 17 years of drought is frankly too much. The upcoming World Championship brings with it a really tough design task, as all teams will have to deal with a dual commitment following two distinct programs. A complicated situation to manage, as the Maranello team will need to allocate resources wisely. Within this scenario, the need to set milestones is paramount. As anticipated by various Italian news media outlets, Ferrari already has very clear ideas in this regard. The plan is to push as much as possible in the early part of the 2025 Formula One season, relying on the fact that the SF-25 can be competitive right from the start. If this is the case, the Maranello team will have the chance to update the car and collect as many points as possible. This is the theory that, of course, must be confirmed on the track. And it is precisely for this reason that the team's update plan has already been set. According to the various reports, the Ferrari technicians and engineers will present the first update package at the Japanese Grand Prix, the third race of the calendar. This is all considering that the car will be able to express on track what the simulator has estimated, without encountering correlation issues that could delay the plans. On this aspect, it seems that the red car team is quite calm, as the latest references obtained in the past season, as well as the feedback from the first outing at the Fiorano circuit, have reassured the working group. Leclerc is leading the team well. We know that part of the top management was present last Wednesday, with Piero Ferrari and Benedetto Vigna quite satisfied with the Frenchman. Red Bull also finds itself in the same situation, having to manage two parallel projects. However, unlike Ferrari, it seems that the team from Milton Keynes is facing more difficult forecasts. The RB21 will indeed have to prove that the problems suffered during the past season no longer exist. McLaren is the favorite, and rightly so, while Ferrari starts from a base that is already competitive if we consider the last third of the 2024 season. The work done, led by Pierre Wache, had one main goal: to fix the many flaws of the RB20. We are talking about an F1 car that, despite having a talent like Max Verstappen, for at least 4 months could not even get to the podium. Truly too little for the team led by Christian Horner. Adrian Newey's departure has left a huge gap that, at least in the past season, was not managed very well. The concern of the French sporting director is present. He himself has made it known, considering that Red Bull is called to a careful, frugal, and practical management. For now, the focus shifts to Bahrain. After the winter break, the wait is finally almost over. Starting tomorrow, the Formula One teams will return to the track in Sakhir for the only official test session before the start of the 2025 season, which will take place in mid-March in Melbourne. For the teams, which have already covered their first kilometers during filming days, this will be the only opportunity to properly fine-tune their cars without the usual restrictions present during filming days, where, for example, demo tires are used. 3 days of testing, totaling 24 hours on track, from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. and from 3 p.m. to 7 p.m. local time, will begin to define the initial competitive balance. Compared to 2024, there is an important change to keep in mind. While last year's tires were essentially a continuation of those introduced in mid-2023, allowing teams to already understand some of their characteristics, this season's tires will be entirely new, not just in terms of compounds, but also in their structure, which has been modified to accommodate the increasing loads of the cars. The test will also serve as an opportunity to see the range of tires that Pirelli has homologated for 2025 in action. All 6 homologated dry weather compounds will be available for the Sakhir tests, and they can be identified as seen in the image. The C1 and C2 will have white markings, the C3 and C4 will have yellow markings, while the C5 and the new C6 will have red markings. To further differentiate them within each group, 3 of these compounds will not have sidebands, while the remaining ones will. After debuting in the 2024 Mexico and Abu Dhabi tests, the new C6 will be available to all teams this year. This is the softest compound of all, intended for use in GPs held on street circuits or tracks that generate low energy loads. Given the characteristics of Bahrain's asphalt, which is very aggressive on tires, it is unlikely to be used in Sakhir, so much so that only 2 teams have selected it. As for the other compounds, the C1 remains the hardest, unchanged from 2024, and is still very similar to last year's version, while the C2 has been moved closer to the C3, which is the most versatile in terms of balance. The C4 has been developed to reduce graining, as has the C5. For the Sakhir event, each team was allowed to choose up to 35 sets of tires, of which 30 will actually be mounted on rims for use on track. However, within those 35 sets, teams could freely allocate their selection, and an analysis of their choices reveals some interesting insights. Historically, Bahrain is a very demanding circuit for tires due to its aggressive asphalt, to the point that the 3 hardest compounds are traditionally selected for the Grand Prix. However, the Sakhir tests also serve as preparation for the championship, which is why the C3, the most intermediate compound in the range and the one most likely to be used throughout the season, will also be the most utilized. Mercedes is the team that has chosen the most C3 sets, with 27, while Williams sits at the opposite extreme with only 15 sets of this compound. These 2 teams switch places when it comes to the C2. Carlos Sainz and Alexander Albon's team has chosen 12 sets, focusing on the harder tires, while George Russell and Kimi Antonelli will have only 2. Speaking of Mercedes, along with Ferrari, it is the top team that has favored the softer compounds the most. The Maranello squad will use only 3 sets of C1 and, notably, just 4 sets of C2, instead prioritizing the C3. Interestingly, Ferrari has also chosen to bring 5 sets of C4 and, along with Williams, is the only team to have selected 1 set each of C5 and C6. This allocation suggests that Ferrari aims to better understand how to manage the warm-up phase of the softer compounds in qualifying conditions, an area where the SF-25 had shown weaknesses. The situation is completely different for McLaren and Red Bull, which have opted to focus on the harder compounds. McLaren will bring 5 sets of C1, fewer only than Aston Martin and Alpine, along with 9 sets of C2. Red Bull, on the other hand, has made a slightly different selection, with only 2 sets of C1 but as many as 11 sets of C2. It is likely that some of these sets will be used for typical aerodynamic data gathering tests.